In a dark, gloomy village, a little girl could be seen sitting quietly in a corner. After accepting her fate of dying, a boy suddenly appeared holding a piece of bread in his hand and gave it to the girl. He then went on to tell her that the Redemption Church was giving out free food to homeless people. The girl was skeptical of the bread at first, but after realizing that nothing else could be worse than starving, and with a little persuasion from the boy, she was all for the idea of going to the Redemption Church to seek safety and food to survive. It had been a week since Dion had returned to the human realm, thinking that he had finally escaped from the nightmare he experienced while he was with the demons, but it was far from over since he was now stuck doing paperwork. After discussing some issues with his butler, a commotion happened outside which drew Dion's attention. The estate knights and the lofty knights were arguing, to which Dion then told his butler to send back the knights to the Empire. But his butler told him that it was not possible as they were entrusted to him by the Empire. Dion then wondered why he had so much paperwork to do after he had handed over the Heart Estate to the king, but also found out that the king returned it to him. This news greatly shocked Dion, as he had no idea of this news, but mostly because he had no desire to own the Heart Estate, as he did have fond memories of the place at all. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Dion planned to pay the emperor a visit, but was interrupted by the sudden appearance of the crown prince and the general, which hates Dion for what he has done in the past. Before the crown prince's arrival, he had heard of Dion's achievement of capturing people from the revolutionary army. He was talking to the princess about the news over a cup of tea. After hearing the news, the princess was more worried that Dion didn't want to see her again after what she had done, and admitted that she had never had to seduce a man in her life since she was a princess. The princess planned on visiting Dion to apologize, but the crown prince told her that it was a bad idea and reminded her that the love she has for Dion was only a performance to bring him over to their side to gain more power and influence. Their plan was going smoothly, and everyone knew that the princess had expressed her love for Count Hart publicly, so no one else would dare to approach him. She then asks the crown prince to find out what Count Hart thinks of her. Back at the Heart Estate, the crown prince was determined to recruit Count Hart, while the general despised him. The only thing Count Hart had on his mind at that moment was how in the world he ended up in that situation. Dion greeted the crown prince and was told to take a seat. Dion then asked the crown prince why they came to visit him, to which he responded by saying that it's just business. After apologizing for what his sister had done previously, he went straight to talking about the main reason why he was there, which was to request a favor from Count Hart. Dion was quite nervous at first, but after hearing that the favor was to become his friend, he was just confused as to what the crown prince was saying. Dion couldn't believe that the crown prince came all the way to the Heart Estate to ask him to become friends. Dion tried to refuse the crown prince's favor, but couldn't do so because of the general's presence, so he had no choice but to reluctantly agree to the favor. The crown prince then told him to come visit him every time he came to the palace and quickly left afterward, giving Dion no chance to say anything. Now the only two people left in the room were Dion and the general. Getting straight to business, the general told Dion that the emperor wanted him to hand over the soldier from the revolutionary army that he captured. Dion guided the general to where the soldier was being kept, but the general was curious about how one of the soldiers died, since he had initially captured 3 of them, but 2 died mysteriously. The general's hatred for Dion could be traced back to the 8-Year War, when Dion was just a mere soldier on the battlefield. Dion was the first noble to be conscripted into war as an ordinary soldier, and to make matters worse, he was mentally weak. In order for him to survive, the method that he chose was to brutally kill people on the battlefield, which drove him insane. Dion was tormented by guilt after every battle, to the point where he ended up splitting his own personality. One regular personality that can only recall being regular, and one blood-hungry murderer that he could switch to on demand. That change in personality is how Dion was able to survive on the battlefield for so long, which the general hated about Dion. The general then asked Dion if he could even remember what happened to the soldier who died, to which he responded that wild dogs must have eaten him since he wasn't there to confirm the details. The general then left after hearing what Dion had to say, which he didn't believe a single word of. The general thought of Dion as a dangerous element and wondered why His Majesty was so fond of him. Dion finally woke up after losing consciousness from stress, after which his butler then suggested that he send the lofty knights out on an expedition to subjugate monsters near the bordering estate, to which he agreed, thinking that he could finally get rid of them, but ended up being dragged along instead. On his way to the bordering estate, Dion asked why he had to come along with them as well, and the knight told him that he shouldn't miss out on this opportunity since he thought that Dion was bored at home. Dion tried refusing them in the beginning, but after everyone decided that he should go, he had no choice but to agree. Monsters suddenly showed up, blocking their path, and the knights went out to battle. Sitting in the back, Dion thought that Dame Lion, the knight that the Emperor personality recommended to Dion to take control of the Ghost Knights, was tired since, with her qualifications, she could have joined any knight order that she wanted but had to put up with the Ghost Knights. Dame asked Dion if he was going to join the battle, but he thought that it would be best to let the Ghost Knights handle it so he could take it easy, but it wasn't going to be that easy for him since he got hit by an arrow out of nowhere. After a while, Dion realized that it wasn't a monster that shot the arrow, but an assassin that was sent to kill him. After the arrow was taken out, Dion got serious and told the Ghost Knights to take out their drugs. Over towards the kingdom where the knights were headed, they saw that the great Count Hart was injured and thought of a plan to frame Dion for attacking their kingdom and get a reward since they knew that the Empire wouldn't want another war. Dame asked Dion what kind of drugs the Ghost Knights just swallowed, and he told her that it was a drug that shut down their common sense and made them fight like wild beasts. Dion then went straight into battle, brutally killing anyone and anything that he came across after capturing one of the assassins alive. Dion then rushed forward and killed one of the assassins. The knight was hesitant about killing and reminded the Ghost Knights that they shouldn't try to fight like decent human beings and just leave enough common sense to distinguish friend from foe and just kill everyone. What Dion said drove fear into the remaining assassins, but it was already too late for them to regret their actions, and the only one they could blame for their deaths was none other than Dion's brother, who was busy with paperwork at the moment. The fight raged on, with Count Dion Hart standing in the midst of all the chaos that was happening. As the fight came to an end, the only thing that was left of the assassins were the pieces of their bodies scattered across the ground. Dion looked down on the assassin that he had captured alive previously and questioned him as to who sent them. In the Empire, a complaint from the kingdom of Ilion reached the Emperor. The Emperor's attendant then reported the matter that had happened with Count Hart and how the Ilion kingdom was trying to frame Count Hart to get a hefty reward from the Empire. After understanding the situation, the Emperor thought that he had been quiet for too long and that his attendant was too old to prepare for war. The news shocked everyone who was in the room. The attendant then went on to state that it had been only 2 years since the last war and that it was too soon to start another one. The Chancellor tried to change the Emperor's mind, but was reminded by the Emperor that he was a tyrant and that conquering the continent was his ultimate objective. The Emperor thought that he should take responsibility as the Emperor since he had attained his position by killing all of his other siblings to get the throne. The Chancellor then left after stating that he would prepare a budget for the upcoming war. After the Chancellor left, the Emperor asked the general if he had heard of the Redemption Church, to which the general responded that it was a cult that had been increasing its influence in the slum areas. The Emperor then stated that they had gotten too powerful and that it would be best to eliminate them, especially since there was an upcoming war. The Emperor decided that it would be best to leave the issue to Count Dion Hart to handle since he was the one who caused the mess. After hearing Count Dion Hart's name, the general quickly opposed the idea of leaving such an important task to Count Hart. The Emperor then asked the general why he disliked Count Hart, to which the general then brought up Count Hart's split personality as the issue, but the emperor saw no issue with what the general said about Dion since he was already aware of everything. The emperor stated that if anything were to happen because of Dion's split personality, then that would be his responsibility to deal with. The general tried to persuade the emperor but was stopped. The emperor told the general that he understood his concern and that he wouldn't just let a dangerous person stay by his side without a reason. The reason why the emperor let Dion stay by his side was that Count Hart needed him in order to take revenge on his family, and so the emperor took Dion as his sword and gradually sharpened it until the time came for him to take his revenge. Dion Hart then ended up killing his entire family, except for the one who managed to get away, which was his brother Cruel Hart. So in order for Dion to complete his revenge, he still needs the emperor on his side, and that is what the emperor was using to his advantage to ensure that Dion Hart will always be on his side. Inside the darkness, Dion was surrounded by dead bodies trying to drag him down, and right as he was about to lose it, the other Dion inside of him covered his eyes and told him that he didn't have to remember it, after which he immediately woke up. Dion simply thought that what he saw was just a bad dream and tried to recall the last thing that he remembered, but couldn't remember anything that happened after he got shot by the arrow. Somewhere in the Hart's estate, Dion's butler had captured a spy who was disguised as one of the servants. Before the butler could get any information out of the servant, he was quickly killed. As the butler was walking off, he turned and threw the dead spy's termination letter at him. The butler then greeted Dion and noticed the injury on his left shoulder. Dion then asked why he could smell blood coming from the butler, to which he stated that he had just apprehended the spy and that an accident had occurred while trying to capture him alive. Since Dion had also failed to figure out who was behind the attack on him, Butler concluded that it must be the Revolutionary Army, an enemy nation, or a nobility of the empire that was behind the attack. He then suggested that it would be too much alone for Dion to take on and told him that he should ask the emperor for assistance. Dion then left for the palace in order to ask the emperor for help, but had to wait since the emperor was in an important meeting. While Dion was waiting, the crown prince and princess showed up. Dion tried to greet them but was stopped by the crown prince, who stated that friends don't need to be so polite with each other, so he was invited to have a cup of tea with them while he waited for the emperor. The crown prince then told Dion that he had heard that he had gotten injured during the monster subjugation expedition, and that he should be more careful since he had to work for the emperor for a long time. The crown prince Hen told Dion that he had no intentions of becoming the emperor, which shocked Dion greatly. He explained that he planned on retiring when the time came and that he hoped nothing bad happened to the emperor, who was their uncle. The current emperor, who was once the 9th prince, had killed all of his siblings along with their children except for the crown prince and princess, who were the children of the 1st prince, unlike any other noble. He had visited the 9th prince often, along with his children, until the day he died. The prince and princess then told Dion to take good care of the emperor. Dion then used going to the bathroom as a way to escape the conversation and leave. The nobles in the empire have begun to question the emperor's rule over the empire and are posing a great threat to him, so in order to ensure the emperor's safety, they absolutely need someone as strong as Dion on their side who can kill their enemies even if they're nobles. While Dion had gotten lost on his way to the washroom, he saw one of the servants and called out to him, which startled the servant. He tried to ask the servant nicely where he could find the washroom, but the way he asked definitely didn't come off as he intended it to. Surprisingly, though, the servant turned out to be a spy who was stealing important documents. He managed to injure Dion but ended up falling. He thought that his chances of escape were low, so he decided to attack Dion instead, but he didn't get the opportunity as he was apprehended by Cruel Hart. Dion wondered why his brother was at the palace. A paper caught the attention of Dion that fell from the spy, but Duke Irving was quicker to obtain the document. He then said that it's been a while since they last saw each other and that he had just come to visit the emperor. He asked Dion if he had also come to visit the emperor, to which Dion just said yes. Before Dion could explain what had happened, the prince and princess showed up and saw that Count Hart was bleeding and immediately called for the palace doctor. They thought that the spy's weapon, which had injured Dion, could have been laced with poison. The palace doctor then came rushing after being called, and as he had expected, it was not Dion Hart who was causing him trouble again. He checked Dion's condition, and thankfully his injury was light, but the prince didn't believe what the palace doctor said since Dion was bleeding a lot and asked him to check properly. Suddenly a voice said that it might have been the demon's curse, and that voice came from none other than the general Nemesius. The reason for his presence was to deliver a message to Count Hart from the emperor, which was a summon. Count Hart then left after telling the prince not to worry about his condition so much. Duke Ister and Cruel also went into their carriage and departed from the palace. The Duke then figured that what he saw on the document that the spy had was a budget for war. The Duke planned on providing special assistance to the Emperor so that he could achieve his own personal goals. The Emperor told Dion that he didn't look well and wondered if he was heavily injured by the spy since he was the most treasured talent in the Empire, but the reason why Dion looked unwell was because he really wanted to use the washroom but still hadn't gotten the chance to. Dion then told the Emperor that the reason for his visit was to return the Hart estate back to him along with the Ghost Knights as well, but the Emperor quickly rejected him, and his resignation was not even up for discussion. The Emperor stated that if Dion granted one of his requests, he would grant him one wish as well. The request the Emperor had for Dion was to completely get rid of the Redemption Church. Dion tried to refuse, but the Emperor continued by stating that he had also assigned the task to his brother and would grant whoever completed the task first a wish. After hearing that, Dion quickly agreed to complete the Emperor's request. Even though Dion knew it was bait, he didn't want any wishes from his brother to be granted. Dion then told the Emperor that he would complete the task first, no matter what, and would defeat his brother. After returning to the Hart estate, Dion complained to his butler about bringing him only tea, to which his butler replied that it was the tea that the Crown Prince had gifted him, but Dion didn't seem to like it very much. His butler then pointed out that he also had to drink an ominous-looking elixir. Dion asked the butler if it was necessary for him to drink it. While they were discussing whether he should drink it or not, Dame Lion returned from her investigation and greeted Dion. Dion then asked if she had gathered any information on the Redemption Church, and she told Dion that it was a cult that was garnering more believers from the slum area, and in return, they had to spread the word to believe in redemption, which was very unusual for a cult. Dion thought about what their main objective was while drinking some tea. After drinking the tea, he decided to go to the washroom, but Dame Lion mistakenly thought that he was going to investigate the Redemption Church himself. She then told him that she would come along as well, which left Dion in another unwanted and unavoidable situation. Just like that, Dion ended up going to investigate the Redemption Church. Dame Lion then suggested that they disguise themselves. Dion said he wouldn't repeat the same mistake he made last time and quickly disappeared. Lion thought that Dion had disappeared because of the Demon King's curse, but Dion left because he really had to use the bathroom. After using the washroom and leaving, he came across his brother, Cruel Hart. Dion then got angry at the mere sight of him but started coughing up blood. He didn't want to show any weakness in front of his brother and went ahead and attacked him. Cruel then stated that he just couldn't sit still with an injured arm and pressed on the spot where he got injured, then backed off. Dion had thought that he was talking about the injury he got from the spy, but the spot where he had pressed was where he got shot by the assassin. Cruel then stated that since Dion was able to move around, the assassins must not have done their task properly, which made Dion even more angry, and he decided that he should kill him right then and there. In that moment, Lion appeared and was surprised by the whole situation, but went straight to protect Dion. Right as she was about to attack Cruel Hart, Dion stopped her since Cruel was considered the hero of the Empire. Cruel then asked Dion if he was investigating the Redemption Church, but Dion didn't provide him with an answer. Cruel then stated that if he got involved in this matter, he would be in danger, but Dion wasn't going to believe that he was concerned since he had sent assassins after him. After Dion left, it was Cruel to think that he was a fool, and that he should just live out the rest of his life in peace since he didn't have much time left. Dion then decided on his disguise, which was to cover himself in dirt, and told Lion to do the same, but she was a bit hesitant since the smell was awful. After being persuaded by Dion, she decided to do the same, and then Dion went ahead and went first to the Redemption Church to infiltrate. Dion arrived at the Redemption Church in a very pitiful state. The sister who was standing outside the church gates believed that Dion was an actual homeless person, and offered him some bread and invited him in. Dame Lion, who was watching what had happened, was amazed by how great Dion's acting was and went ahead to do the same thing, but she was immediately rejected by her sister, who could easily tell that Dame was a noble and was trying to fool her. She stated that they were out of food and closed the doors on her. After Dion had managed to infiltrate the Redemption Church, he was given some food by the sister, to which he then asked her what the cost of their hospitality was, and she told him that it didn't cost anything. Dion looked around the Redemption Church, but couldn't spot anything that was unusual or suspicious. While Dion was observing the sister, he asked him if he was uncomfortable, to which Dion said that it was okay since his appearance might disturb her. The sister told him not to worry and went straight ahead to uncovering his face, and the first thing that caught her attention were Dion's red eyes. Before she could question Dion about her suspicions, Dion quickly said that seeing his red eyes must be disgusting. She then replied that she wasn't disgusted, but thought that he was Dion Hart since she knew that he had red eyes. After brushing away her suspicions, she told Dion that the Redemption Church was a shrine formed to save those who were suffering under Eduardo's rule, who was the current emperor. She then blamed the emperor for the people's suffering and said that the emperor should have ruled in peace. Dion wasn't buying into anything that the sister said and instead asked who was going to save him in hopes of finding out more information. Dion was taking a tour of the church while eating the bread that was given to him, but a little girl bumped into him. The little girl asked Dion if he was a new believer and then said that he shouldn't worry about anything since he was now with the Redemption Church and that they would provide him with food. Dion responded by stating that he hoped to be redeemed as well. In that moment, a little boy called out to Sia, saying that it was time for them to pray. The girl then left with the boy and continued on his way, thinking about how he was going to get into the guarded rooms, but was suddenly told to stop where he was by someone. Outside the Redemption Church, Dame Lion thought that she would be able to sneak in from the back, but gave up as it was not possible. In that moment, Lion heard her sister, another believer, talking about an intruder inside the church and immediately thought that it was the Count. She scrapped her plan of trying to enter nicely and just broke right through the front entrance and started asking where her lord was. Dion was calming down after being stopped by one of the priests since he thought that he had been discovered, but was given some more bread to eat, after which he then snuck into the prayer room. But as he was walking around, he got discovered by the sister and one of the priests. However, Dion Hart quickly hid behind a curtain before he was spotted. The priest then ordered everyone to check the place thoroughly. Cruel Heart then told Dion to be quiet before they got caught. Right when he was about to leave, the priests started their prayer ceremony. The sister then stepped forward to explain to the congregation what true redemption was, but in order for them to get a more detailed explanation, they had to go to another secret room. The sister then stretched out her hands against what seemed like a normal wall, but suddenly a secret passage opened up. Dion and Cruel saw everything that was happening behind the curtain, which made them think that it was magic. One by one, the believers started to go through this mysterious passage inside the wall, and the sister followed them afterwards. Dion and Cruel then came from behind the curtain after everyone had left. Dion then argued with her for a while, but then focused his attention on the wall where the passage had opened up. To his surprise, a purple gem was on the wall, which was an enchantment. Enchantments provide the same effect as magic, which only the demons possess as long as the user pays a price. Dion thought that the Redemption Church was a lot more suspicious than he had previously thought and wondered who was behind them. Dion wanted to quit the mission given to him by the Emperor, but couldn't since he didn't want the wish to go to his brother. Another believer then rushed in right afterwards, prompting Dion to hide himself again. The believer then went straight towards the wall where the gem was and called for the sister, who was referred to as Madame Shylin. He then told her that someone had barged into the church and caused problems, asking for her lord, but before he could get an answer from her, Lion barged in and asked for her lord. She then grabbed the believer and asked him where her lord was, to which the believer had no idea what she was talking about. Since she didn't want to refer to her lord as Dion Hart or Count since he was still undercover, she had no choice but to refer to him as a lord. Dion, who was still hiding under a table, saw everything that was happening and wondered why Lion was making such a commotion. Madame Shylin was also hearing everything that was taking place through the crystal on the wall and recognized the voice of Lion who had come to the church before. She then realized that she was referring to the man with the crimson eyes who had also come to the church, who was Count Dion Hart. After Cruel Heart had entered the building, she had increased security. She had met with Cruel Heart when he first came in, and she already knew that he and the Duke were plotting something, and that she had no plans to fall for it. Cruel had received a blueprint from the Duke and was told to finish the game as safely as possible. Madame Shylin then refused to call the guards on him as courtesy since they both served the same master, and then left. She had never expected that Dion Hart would just walk in through the front door, which caught her off guard, but she had already accomplished the purpose of the Redemption Church, so the only thing left to do was to wrap things up. On the other side, Dion had finally decided to quit hiding and revealed himself to Lion since the communication from the gem had been terminated. The Count then decided to leave as quickly as possible, but before he could, Lion went down on her knees, kneeled, and apologized for referring to him as the Lord. Even though Dion told her that it was okay, she still planned on taking full responsibility. She was able to get a full grasp on what kind of person Dion Hart was and pledged to serve him with all her heart. Dion didn't refuse since it was more beneficial for him, and he said that he would try his best to ensure that he was worthy of her loyalty. Even in her oath, she still chose to prioritize the Emperor and the kingdom before her lord. But nonetheless, they both decided to retreat and leave the Redemption Church for now since they had already gathered enough information. They planned on returning afterwards with the Ghost Knights in order to do a proper search of the place and bring an enchantress with them to uncover the secret room. 3 days after they had left the Redemption Church, Dion couldn't find a single good sorcerer in the Empire since most of them were located to the south of the Empire. Dion thought that it would take too long to head south to recruit a sorcerer and hoped that Cruel hadn't found one yet. The butler then brought good news, stating that they had found a sorcerer, and Dion decided to head out to recruit the sorcerer, who was located in a village not too far from the Hart estate. They had arrived at the village, and Dion thought that their place of hiding was a bit unusual from what he had heard, but decided to hurry and find the sorcerer. But to their surprise, Cruel Heart was one step ahead of them again. Dion then wondered if his brother was following him around since they kept crossing paths. Suddenly, Dion got hit by a rock from one of the villagers, who said that disaster had finally found them. The villager then told them to get out of the village immediately. But before anyone could say anything, Dion had walked up to her and said that he was closer to evil than a disaster since he thought that she was just crazy. But to Dion's surprise, the villager that he had just intimidated was the sorcerer that he came looking for. She then walked up to the Dion and told him that he must not hate anyone or anything since a disaster would occur if he did, which caught him off guard since he didn't even realize that she had gotten so close to him. A girl then showed up and calmed down the lady who was causing trouble for Dion. They then started talking about how devastating the disaster was, and Rand simply stated that it hadn't occurred yet, and that they shouldn't judge people preemptively. After what had happened, Dion thought that his only option now was to head south to recruit a sorcerer, but before he could leave, Ran stopped him, told him that she had been waiting for him, and introduced herself as the villager's granddaughter. She then apologized, to which Dion told her that it was fine since he was planning on leaving. Ran then told him that he was there to find a sorcerer, which surprised him, and she then told him that she was also a sorcerer, and that she could help him resolve the problem he had with the Redemption Church. Dion could clearly see that she was skilled since what she had just said was not public knowledge, and if he didn't take her, then Cruel Heart would, which he didn't like the idea of, so he decided to take her with him. Ran's grandmother then approached Cruel and embraced him, which caught him off guard. She then told him that he was going through a lot and that she loved him. She then told him that he should live long to win the battle to see who would live longer between him and Dion. She told him that she hopes he wins, but if he ever finds himself at death's door, he should ensure that he takes Dion with him. After hearing that, Cruel drew his sword at the lady and told her that he would take care of his own problems and that she should mind her own business. Cruel had already decided that his death would happen after Dion's, and nothing was going to change that. On their way back to the Empire, Dion asked Ran about what her grandmother meant when she said that. "You saw it too," to which Ran replied that it was his future. Dion was then curious about how she was able to see his future before even meeting him, and so she told him about how his future was intertwined with someone else's future from the village, and right in that moment, a boy appeared from the bushes. Ran then mentioned that to Dion, hatred is like a fire, and the boy was like a bomb. If the bomb explodes, then a fire will start, but if the fire starts first, then the bomb will explode. The boy then kneeled down and asked Dion to take him with him. He said that if Dion was the disaster, then he was going to need him in the future. The first time the boy discovered his future, his grandmother told him that he was the bastard who was going to serve the disaster, and that he was a great supporter. After what had happened, the villagers' attitude towards him completely changed. The once nice and sweet villagers, whom he had considered family, started to hate him and wanted to get rid of him. They all turned their backs on him because of what the sorcerer had said about his future. Since they were all so certain about his future, he decided that he should definitely meet their expectations and silently waited for the disaster to appear. And as expected, Dion showed up at the village. Dion had finally returned to the Heart Estate, to which his butler then inquired about who the boy behind him was, and Lion then answered, stating that he was the village boy that Dion had decided to bring back, who was called Dan. He then stated that he lacks education and isn't that great in battles, but was willing to serve Dion. Dion then said that they would talk later and told Lion to prepare to depart as soon as possible and to bring 10 volunteers from the Ghost Knights. Dan tried to come as well, but was told by Dean to stay put at the Heart Estate since he didn't have any battle experience. After the Ghost Knights arrived, they started a fire to prevent the people from escaping. The Ghost Knights' mission was to set fire to the Redemption Church's building and kill anyone that looked suspicious while Dion infiltrated. Ran had requested that the Ghost Knights not take their pills since there was no need for bloodshed. But once she said that it was all for Dion's sake, the knights happily agreed. After starting the fire and causing a commotion, the people realized that they were the Ghost Knights that belonged to Dion and didn't really care if the Redemption Church was a cult since it made them feel like living again. They decided that if the knights were going to wreck the place, they should kill them first. One of the Ghost Knights was about to kill one of the believers as an example. But right then the girl's friend appeared. Without taking the pills, the knight was unable to kill the child and threw away his sword. The believers then came to the realization that since Dion Heart was the sword of the Emperor, it must have meant that the Emperor had ordered the destruction of the Redemption Church, which made them hate the Emperor even more. Inside the Redemption Church, Dion and the sorcerer were examining the gem on the wall. She then stated that the gem had many functions, but was immediately shocked afterwards since the gem was actually magic that was concealed as an enchantment. This news came as a shock to everyone, since magic shouldn't be in the human realm at all. Dion then wondered if the Demon King knew of the situation, but to his surprise, Ran was able to quickly figure out the structure of the magic and was able to utilize it, which was even more shocking since sorcerers aren't supposed to be able to use magic. Ran had succeeded in activating the magic and was able to open the secret passage, after which they entered. To Dion's surprise, it seemed like they had returned to the prayer room after they had entered the passage, but Ran explained that it was different since there were cracks all over the place and a seal on the floor. Another door was located in front of them, which seemed ominous, but Lion decided to enter first after everyone thought it was dangerous. After entering the door, to their surprise, everything was a forest, but Ran was quick to state that everything there was magic disguised as an enchantment, and that they had to get to the true room by completing a certain action, to which Dion asked how long it would take for her to figure out what that action was. She then told Dion that since magic was unfamiliar to her, it would take at least 10 minutes, which was too long since someone could already be in that room, but he had no choice but to wait. Seeing how Dion was pacing back and forth, Lion brought a chair and gestured for him to sit down instead, but before she could complete what she was saying, Dion completely disappeared. Dion was then teleported to the room where he wanted to be, but yet again Cruel Heart was standing before him. Outside the church, Madame Shallow was watching the situation from afar, and thought that the knights were too soft since if it were her, she would have sealed off the whole building and killed everyone. She then left the scene after stating that Dion wasn't going to get what he wanted and that it would be her victory. Dion then stated that Cruel was quick wherever he got his source from, but he didn't respond and simply set fire to the documents that Dion had been after all along. He then rushed towards the fire in an attempt to save at least one of the documents as evidence, but Cruel grabbed his hand. Dion then told him to let go and asked why he burned everything. But again, he didn't receive a response, and Cruel just lifted him up on his shoulder since Dion didn't have enough strength to resist him. Even while Cruel was taking Dion out of the fire, he was still asking the same question in his head, which was who was behind the Redemption Church, but he came to the conclusion that it was Duke Isles and Cruel Heart since they were the ones with the highest authority besides the nobles and the Emperor. Dion was angry that it was a losing fight from the start and that he had worked hard for no reason. Cruel had put Dion down after bringing him back to where Ran and Lion were, and then Dion made it clear that he would definitely kill Cruel Heart. Cruel then left after stating that he shouldn't talk about anything that happened if he wanted to live. Dion then woke up at the Heart Estate and thought that it would be Cruel's victory since he had taken some of the documents with him. Lion then walked in and asked if he was okay, and he said yes. He then asked if Ran was still at the estate since he had something to ask her, but Lion told him that she had already left. Dion wanted to try and curse Cruel, but he wouldn't even have been able to ask. Lion then told Dion that entering the hidden room was totally his doing. The condition for teleportation was for him to make a circle counterclockwise 3 times and clockwise twice. Lion also told Dion that Ran had left a note for him before she left, but he didn't have to move since the butler had brought it with him along with some tea, and that he also had a visitor. One of the Emperor's knights had come to escort Dion to the palace, where the Emperor was waiting for him. At the palace, the Emperor had just woken from a nightmare. Ever since he became the Emperor, he hasn't been able to sleep properly at all since all of the people that he has killed tormented him at night. It had gotten so bad that they were now tormenting him in reality as an illusion. While the Emperor was being tormented by guilt, the Crown Prince came to his rescue. The Crown Prince had come to inform the Emperor that Dion Heart had arrived per his summons, along with Cruel Heart. He then asked if he was all right and thought of calling the royal doctor, but thought something was weird after the Emperor said that he was being annoying while looking behind him, but realized that the Emperor was showing signs of hallucination. The Emperor then told the Crown Prince that the upcoming war and stress were the reasons why he was hallucinating. Even though he felt bad for the crown prince, he had no intention of casting away his hallucinations and nightmares since they sort of made him happy. The crown prince then lashed out at his uncle, but he calmly responded that he knew that it was an illness, but if it weren't for him, then all the people who died would have still been alive, and that it was a burden he had to carry as the emperor and as a human being. Both Dion and Cruel Heart were waiting for the emperor together, and Dion then asked Cruel why he was staring at him but didn't receive a response from him yet again. Both of them were then permitted to enter, and they both greeted the emperor. The emperor didn't seem too happy, which caught Dion's attention. The emperor then stated that he had heard that Dion had displayed some unruly behavior during the mission, which was leaving some of the believers alive and only killing the ones necessary, but also praised him for his efforts in trying to find out who the mastermind was. Nevertheless, Cruel Heart was the one who had gathered the evidence, and so his wish would be the one that was granted. The emperor then asked what Cruel Heart desires, and he asked the emperor for the heart estate, which Dion currently has possession of. The emperor then asked Dion what he thought. The wish had caught him off guard, but he thought of the heart estate as a burden, so he simply said that he wouldn't mind handing it over. The matter was settled, but the emperor stated that in order for him to claim the estate, he needed a title, and his only options were to forsake his last name and obtain a title under a new name, or become the Patriarch of Heart County. Back when the 8-year war had ended, the emperor had offered Dion the same proposal, which Dion had refused and instead wished for the destruction of his family. The emperor then bestowed upon him the title of honorary count. If Cruel chose to become the patriarch of the Heart family, then it would be the perfect opportunity for Dion to annihilate everyone, but Cruel refused to become the patriarch or change his last name. Dion wondered why Cruel was turning down such a good opportunity to become the patriarch. The emperor then handed the estate over to Duke Irving, who cruelly served and dismissed everyone except Dion. After everyone had left, the atmosphere between Dion and the emperor was weird. The emperor then broke the silence by stating that he was waging war against the Iliad kingdom, which Dion wasn't too fond of since he was sick of wars. The emperor then stated that he was going to leave the demon realm in his hands since the demon king wouldn't sit still while he was taking over the continent, and that he should ensure that the demon king did not make a move. He then added that he expects the seal on him to be removed the next time they meet. Back at Duke Eilster's castle, Cruel Heart had told the Duke about the reward that he had received from the Emperor after completing his mission. The Duke then asked if the Heart estate was enough for him, to which Cruel responded that it was enough for him. Since the Duke knew that Dion wanted to return the Heart estate to the Emperor, he told Cruel that he hoped that he didn't take the Heart estate for his brother's sake. Cruel then gave him a simple reply, which was that he didn't have anything else that he wanted, which left the Duke no room to pose another issue. The Duke then asked him if there was anything else worth mentioning. Cruel then stated that there wasn't anything. He didn't want the Duke to find out that Dion knew that he was the one behind the Redemption Church. Cruel was interrupted by the Duke's sudden call for them to leave for a meeting. On his way out, Cruel decided that he would keep the fact that Dion knew everything a secret, since if the Duke found out, he would order him to kill Dion. On his way to the meeting, Duke Eilster greeted Madame Shallow, who had returned from her mission. She then stated that there were many believers left from the Redemption Church, which would allow him to achieve his goal. The true purpose of the Redemption Church was to create believers who were absolutely loyal to Duke Eilster by turning them against the Empire and the Emperor, which worked out well in his favor. The Duke then told Madame Shallow to lay low for a while since they couldn't be found out by the Emperor. After everyone had gathered for the meeting, they started complaining about why the Emperor had called for a meeting so suddenly. The Duke already knew what the meeting was for, and considered the other officials arguing to be fools. The Emperor then made his entrance, and everyone stood and greeted him. He then went straight to the main topic, stating that he plans on declaring war in 3 days. After hearing this news, all of the officials were shocked, since it hadn't been long since the last war ended. The emperor then told them that he only proclaimed that the war had ended since no nation had challenged them, but the situation now is different. Since the news of Dion's injury had spread to the other kingdoms, they started to take the empire lightly and had forgotten their fear of the emperor. They had thought that Dion's heart was a large part of the empire's power, which led them to believe that since he was injured, they could seize the opportunity and strike the empire. Even after explaining everything to the officials, they were still opposed to the idea of a war happening, but they could not oppose the idea after the emperor made himself clear to them, so they had no choice but to agree. The emperor then ended the meeting after telling them to come up with solutions to deal with the revolutionary army for the next meeting. The emperor then called for the duke and told him that the culprit that was behind the Redemption Church was from his faction. The duke then tried to apologize, but the emperor immediately pointed his sword at the duke and then told him that there were rumors going around that he was the savior and the emperor was evil. The duke then told him that he couldn't kill him since he needed the other nobles to go along with his war without any opposition. The emperor then withdrew his sword, and the duke left while thinking about how he planned on taking over the emperor's position. The crown prince suddenly asked Dion if he was heading to the demon realm now, which surprised Dion since the crown prince shouldn't have known that. The prince then told Dion that he didn't need to be so tense since he was the prince, and knowing his secret was only to prepare him to be the emperor at any time if necessary. The prince then reminded him that he was to return if the demon king decided to wage war on the empire, and the Dion said that he'd keep that in mind. The prince then left after telling Dion that he is always grateful for everything that he does. The prince had no idea what the emperor was thinking, but he planned on taking all the necessary steps to prepare for Dion's betrayal in case the demon king provided him with a better offer. While the prince was thinking about how difficult it was to get close to Dion, the princess showed up and asked him how his talk with Dion was going. He told her that they had to talk about something important and asked her why she hadn't become the crown princess. She told him that she didn't feel like it, but the prince told her that she was next in line for the throne after the emperor and him. She then asked why he was being so impatient, which not even the prince had realized. She then took his hand and brought him to the garden, where she had prepared tea for him. The prince then told her that the emperor had started hallucinating. She asked if he had seen the physician, but was also told that the emperor didn't want to get treated. After informing her of how urgent the situation was, he told her to start focusing on what she's doing since anything could happen at this point. After returning to the Heart Estate, Dion couldn't stop wondering how much the crown prince knew about him. He then asked Dan, who had come to ask him something but had decided not to since Dion was in a bad mood, if he had something to say. He then asked Dion if he would allow him to start investing money. Realizing that he was in a bad mood, Dan started explaining himself to try and convince Dion. Dion thought of 2 reasons why Dan had wanted to follow him, but the truth was irrelevant. He gave Dan a piece of paper that would allow him to borrow money, and then told him that he didn't care what his reason for following him was as long as he didn't get in his way. As Dion hopped on his horse and was about to leave the Heart Estate, the ghost knights suddenly came riding towards him. Dion then told his butler to take care of them and left immediately. The butler then stopped them since it was an order from Dion, after which Lion came and apologized to the butler for their rude behavior. The knights then got up and started leaving, but none of them had any idea that they were being watched by a spy from the Revolutionary Army. Well, except for the butler who noticed something strange. While Dion was on his way back to the demon realm, a few spies from the Revolutionary Army were tailing him, waiting for an opportunity to strike. At the Revolutionary Army's headquarters, Duke Ulster was telling the chief of the Revolutionary Army that they shouldn't make a move until the emperor conquered half of the continent. The chief then inquired as to why they shouldn't make a move, to which the Duke responded that when the war reaches its peak and the emperor becomes unable to stop, it will be their opportunity to strike since a majority of the guards at the royal palace will be used as reinforcements. That means even if they were to enter the palace, they wouldn't be caught easily, which was great for the Revolutionary Army and the Duke. Suddenly, one of the soldiers entered and reported to the chief that Dion Hart had secretly left the empire on the emperor's orders. They considered this a great opportunity since Dion was a variable and sent someone to secretly observe him. The chief then left to give out orders. The Duke already knew what was going to happen to the Revolutionary Army's spies following Dion, since the emperor had sent soldiers to guard Dion. As expected, all of the spies were killed by the guards, but the Duke already knew about the guards on Dion and sent Cruel Heart to take care of the guards and follow Dion. Cruel Heart's mission from the Duke was to find out where Dion was headed and report back. At the remains of the Redemption Church, she was kneeling down in front of what was left of the building. Her friend then covered her with a blanket and asked how long she planned on staying like that. Both of them were sad that the only place they could call home was suddenly destroyed without any warning. The boy then said that he was going to join the Revolutionary Army and asked if she would go with him. Paul had found Ja in the slums, and ever since he met her, he had always treated her like his little sister. But now there wasn't even a shred of hope that could be seen on the girl's face. Paul then tried to leave on his own, but not even he realized how attached he had gotten to Ja, and so he just couldn't ignore her now. At the demon realm, one of the corps commanders was wondering when Dion Hart was going to come back, but suddenly she received a signal from the western wall, after which she left in a hurry to see what it was. To her surprise, it was Dion Hart, the one person she was standing guard to see. She wasted no time and went straight to greet Dion and ask how his mission went, to which Dion responded that it was tiring. Dion then told her about his mission at the Redemption Church, but the corps commander had no idea what he was talking about. After Dion explained, she said that it would have been better for the people to have followed him instead of the Redemption Church. She directed him to where the Demon King was. A meeting was being held with different leaders from the demon realm about the Empire's attack on the Ilian Kingdom. The Demon King then said that he didn't know that the leaders had so much interest in the human realm. The Elf King then said that it was because they would aim for the demon realm next, and as a leader, he couldn't just sit by. He also remarked that he hoped the humans didn't cause any harm to them because of something the demons did. The demon then said that he was arrogant, and told everyone that the agent he had sent to the human realm had just returned. The Demon King greeted Dion and asked how his trip was. The Demon King then stated that he had some questions for him and started talking about the Empire's attack on the Ilian Kingdom and asked Dion if the Emperor's objective was to take over the continent, to which Dion said yes. Before Dion could finish his explanation to the Demon King, he was interrupted by the Elf King, who asked the Demon King if he really thought that Dion was trustworthy, which all of the other leaders seemed to be suspicious of. The Demon King then said that as long as the demon is in the demon realm, he is trustworthy. Dion then reported to the Demon King that the Emperor told him to monitor the Demon King, and if he planned on going to war, he was supposed to return immediately. Dion also told the Demon King about his discovery of magic being used in the human realm, but he didn't seem to be fazed by the news at all, which surprised Dion. The Demon King then told Dion to show Ben his left arm before he left since it was injured, but before Dion could say anything, Ben suddenly showed up, which surprised Dion. The Demon King was still thinking about the report that Dion had made about magic being discovered in the human realm. Every one of the leaders thought that no demon would dare use magic in the human realm without the Demon King's permission, and so they thought that it was the Demon King who did it himself. One of the leaders said that it wasn't important and that the times were changing. A new hero was going to appear, and this time he would be an absolute threat to the Demon King. Even after saying all that, the Demon King still didn't care and told him that he was going to eventually cross paths with the hero and that he was getting bored anyway. The meeting then ended, but the Demon King didn't like the way the Elf King spoke to him, so he reminded him that he was the ruler of the demon realm, and even though the elves hated the demons, he shouldn't make it so obvious next time. In the Demon King's castle, Ben was trying to examine Dion, but was unable to since Dion kept telling him that he was okay. Ben recalled his time when he was first appointed as Dion's doctor and how he was unable to treat him in a timely manner. He had thought that since he was unable to complete his duty, Dion would have killed him, but to his surprise, Dion didn't kill him at all and instead told him to go take care of his business. Ben then showed Dion an amulet that was made with his blood and the Demon King's magic, which allowed him to know Dion's physical condition, which Dion thought was very weird. While they were talking, Dion's personal attendant saw them and asked why Ben was with him. He then concluded that Dion must have been injured and became worried about him. Heen, the demon who had taken Dion to the garden before, showed up and tried to ask Dion if he had any spare time, but she was quickly caught by Dion's attendant and was taken away. Ed then brought Heen to a different area and asked why a lowly succubus dared to try and speak to Dion. She then told him that Dion liked the garden she was taking care of and told him that she was only trying to give Dion one of the flowers from the garden. Ed thought that there was no way Dion would like such a flower, but after being told by Heen that he indeed did like the flower, he quickly took it and decided to give it to Dion himself. He had thought of killing her in the beginning, but Dion had told him not to, so he had no choice but to let her go. Dion was sitting on his bed, wondering why Ed had accepted such a flower from him. The flower wasn't exactly something Dion was interested in. In fact, he wanted to quickly get rid of it. A blade then suddenly came flying towards Dion, which he barely dodged. The second corps commander, Deviliania, appeared and praised Dion for dodging her knife as usual. She then asked if her blade didn't even deserve a reaction from him since she was the second corps commander who specialized in stealth. She had no idea that Dion was actually scared and mistakenly thought that Dion didn't react because he didn't sense any killing intent, after which she then realized her purpose of the visit, which was to bring Dion a lot of presents. Deviliana was the person that Dion really hated coming into contact with within the Demon King's castle, solely because of how annoying she was. Dion had no choice but to go along with Deviliana's games and just suffer while she dressed him up in all kinds of different clothes. Before Dion's suffering could end, the 8th Corps commander, Hell, showed up and greeted Dion. Dion was happy since it was a good chance for him to get away, but he ended up getting stuck because of his weapons. The 2nd Corps commander then decided to leave, but before she left, she asked the 8th commander if he should be there right now since someone was speaking ill of Dion in the first city. The vice captain and the commander then started to argue, which annoyed Dion, but he started wondering where the 1st Corps commander had gone. The 8th Corps commander was born from the darkness with the Demon King's powers. His sole purpose was to ensure that no details of Dion's appearance made it out to the human realm. So to put it simply, he was an assassin. The 8th Corps commander had returned after silencing someone. After being reassured by his vice captain, the commander was happy to go and greet Dion again. But he yet again showed up unexpectedly and scared Dion, which made him cough up blood. Thinking that it was his fault, the commander then tried to kill himself to repent, but stopped immediately after Dion told him that he was glad to see him. Dion wanted to get rid of him quickly, so he told him that he had done his mission well and that he should go and rest. The commander and Ben then left, which allowed Dion to finally be alone, and so he decided that he should start carrying out his mission that was assigned to him by the Emperor. Since Dion was a spy, he decided that he should gather information about his opponent first, so he decided to go to the library. The welcome he received was not really to his liking, but he just decided to hurry, take what he wanted, and leave. Dion then took a book about the Imperial analysis regarding current heroes. The book contained all information about every hero, starting from the very first one, and is updated every time new information is obtained. Dion checked if there was any information about him in the book, but there was no portrait of him since the Demon King didn't want any of his physical details to be leaked. After seeing Cruel Heart listed as the 4th hero, Dion got angry and put the book back on the shelf, after which another book written by the Demon King himself caught Dion's eye. The hero was someone who was chosen directly by the world to eliminate the Demon King, which meant that their abilities far exceeded those of regular peoples. People that have absorbed hero fragments are called champions, and also have stronger abilities than regular people, but not as strong as heroes. Dion then saw information about the Demon King inside the book and thought that it would be good information. But before he could read it, the Demon King showed up and the book fell out of Dion's hand. When Dion was picking up the book, he saw a piece of information saying that the existence of the Demon Lord and heroes is proof that the world is immature, which made Dion wonder what was meant by that statement. Dion then asked the Demon King what brought him to the library, and he said that he had a book he wanted to take. The Demon King then apologized and left after taking the book that Dion was reading. After his failure to get any information, Dion decided to head back to his room, but he heard other demons talking about a party that was going to be held for the return of the 5th Corps Commander. They also said that the commander and the vice captain were dating, but they immediately stopped talking after realizing that Dion was hearing everything that they were saying. The demons thought they were going to die for gossiping and started to apologize for their behavior. But Dion had quickly vanished before they even noticed, since relationships between demons were of no concern to him. The only thing that was on his mind was the special wine from the demon world. But by the time he arrived where the party was being held, it was already over. Dion thought it was a wasted trip since the wine that was being consumed was from the human realm. But while Dion was standing in the middle of everything, a few demons entered and thought that Dion had drunk all of the wine, which made Dion upset since he had never seen those wines before, but he didn't even get to explain himself as they started calling for assistance. Soon, everyone in the Demon King's castle had found out that Dion had drank the wine, and before he could do or say anything, he was quickly surrounded by the castle guards and soldiers ready to take him down. All of the guards held their shields up as defense against the Dion. Dion just stood there, angry at everything that was happening around him. In the demon realm, everyone was opposed to the idea of him drinking. Dion thought that even if he had bad habits after drinking, they could easily control him, so he didn't understand why they were acting the way they were. Unknown to Dion, though, was an event that happened 2 years ago at his welcome party. Dion had drank too much at the party, which made him start questioning one of the soldiers at the party and asking if he was an enemy. The soldier didn't like Dion to begin with, so he went along with what Dion was saying and stated that he was an enemy. After saying that, Dion quickly stabbed him in the chest, and just like that, one of the corps commanders had fallen, which led the demons to acknowledge Dion's skills. After that day, a new rule was established. The soldier then tried to voice his opinions, but caught the attention of Dion. Dion gave them a simple smile, which to them looked like more than just a smile, which freaked them out. Before Dion could say anything, the Demon King showed up and told Dion to stop. The Demon King, along with Ben and Ed, had arrived where he was. The Demon King asked Dion if he could hear him, which Dion could, but he had no idea how to respond. The Demon King then thought that since Dion was calm, he was only at stage 1 and told him that no one there was his enemy and that he could put the bottle in his hand down. Dion then put the bottle on the ground and told the Demon King that he had no intention of fighting anyone there. Since Dion had used honorifics to refer to the Demon King, they questioned whether or not Dion was actually drunk, to which he told them he hadn't drank anything and was just checking out the bottles since they were from the human realm. The Demon King thought that Dion was just bored and asked him if he wanted to visit the second city with the 2nd Corps Commander. Dion had no intention of going with the 2nd Corps Commander since she was really annoying to him. The Demon King then stated that he should go while he still has the chance since a war could break out at any moment. The conversation started flowing in the wrong direction for Dion, to the point where he had no choice but to follow the Demon King's suggestion. While everyone was leaving, the Demon King called for Ben to come with him. In the Demon King's quarters, he was holding a document in his hand that stated that the kingdom of Ilion had surrendered to the Empire. The Demon King then stated that he had planned to make his move when the Empire had conquered more than half of the continent, but the way things were going didn't leave him with much of an option. The Demon King then took out a piece of stone and announced to everyone that the use of magic was prohibited in that moment, and that the only exception would be if their lives were in any danger. He then announced that the 2nd, 4th, and 5th Corps commanders should issue our appropriate punishments for any violations, which gave them full authority to kill anyone they wanted. Normally, the Demon King wouldn't pay any attention to a warrior, but the situation was different since they were in the midst of a war. The best option would be to delay the appearance of a warrior as much as possible. The Elf King had taken notice of the sudden change that the Demon King made but stated that it was too late, and that even the Demon King hadn't realized that the warrior's appearance was a lot closer than he had thought. Back at the Empire, the Emperor had just received news from his attendant that it would be very difficult to continue the war, to which the Emperor asked if it was because of the amiable Margrave. His attendant then told him that he had accepted the Ilion kingdom's surrender and even let the royals and people live, which was unlike what he had done previously in the 8-year war. As long as a noble was alive, the people's spirit would not be broken since the soldiers obtained from the conquest would not be loyal to the empire. They could stop and replenish their supplies, but there was no way for them to get more supplies, so the attendant pleaded with the king to stop the war. He already knew that opposing the emperor's decision could mean death for him, but he had no choice but to tell him. To his surprise, though, the emperor wasn't mad at him at all, but one of the nobles who was there asked what the attendant was talking about and stated that they could get more soldiers by conscripting the commoners into war, which didn't sit well with the emperor. The emperor then told them how outrageous their idea was and how they would rather offer up commoners to go to war instead of their own personal soldiers. The emperor then asked him if he knew why people paid taxes and then started explaining to everyone, stating that the citizens have an option to protect the empire, that the empire has an obligation to protect the citizens, and that if soldiers were needed, he would just conscript the nobles instead. If there were 2 or more men in the family, then more than half of their private soldiers, along with them, would be sent to war, and if they decided not to participate, then they would still have to forfeit 2/3 of their private soldiers. The emperor then dismissed them after telling them to go prepare for war. After everyone had left, the emperor thought that all of them were disgusting, including himself. The emperor's hallucinations had gotten a lot worse, to the point where they were now affecting his daily life. The empire was now fighting in the southernmost part with the Barbai tribe. Under orders from the empire, this area was managed by the second hero, Stigma Primero. The hero had just received news that the empire had declared war on its next target, which was the kingdom of Sarahan. The power that the second hero had, along with his armed focus, was more than enough to have created a warlord. The second hero was happy after hearing the news that the emperor had declared war again. One of his subordinates asked if he really loved wars that much, and he stated that it was not because he loved war, but because the emperor would reward you once you made a significant contribution, and that there was something that he really wanted to request from the emperor. During the 8-year war, he obtained the title of Marquis and a great estate in the south. At first, he was satisfied, but after hearing what Dion Hart had asked for, which was to exterminate his entire family, he wondered how Dion could think of something like that, and began to really admire him. He then wondered if Dion was going to join the war and was told that he would join, but it would be late. He then stated that he couldn't wait to meet him and told his subordinate to burn the rest of the enemies who were still alive and prepare for war. Just like Dion, Stigma was planning on requesting permission from the emperor to exterminate his own family. On their way to the second city, Devilinia told Dion that she thought that they would be alone on their trip to the second city since Ben was in the carriage with them. Ben then told her that it was an order from the Demon King and told her that even if he didn't come, they wouldn't be alone since she had brought along so many soldiers with her. Dion wondered why so many soldiers were coming when they were just heading to the second city. Dion then remembered that Ririnal had given him a defensive necklace before he left, and that even Ed had made sure he was wearing armor. Without knowing the reasons behind their actions, Dion began to feel uneasy and wanted to leave the carriage. A guard then informed Devilania that there were too many demonic monsters blocking their path. The Second Corps soldiers were putting up a great fight, but there were just too many monsters, and after Dion came out of the carriage with everyone, he was surprised by how unfazed they were by the situation. The responsibility for the demonic monsters was left to the Demon King. He was supposed to take care of them so that they didn't invade other species' territories, and by ordering his subordinates to travel through the outskirts, it meant they would have to go where their territory meets the borders of other species, which Dion had foolishly agreed to before. Dion had thought that Ben was going to say something nice to him, but instead, Ben asked him if he didn't feel like fighting today.